Have you ever made a mistake so small it changed everything? What would you do if you realized you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? This is the story of how a single key, a simple mistake, and a moment of routine exposed a secret hidden for years. Kamenyalka apartment block, Prospect Mira, Moscow. At 9:42 p.m. on a Wednesday, nothing historic was supposed to happen. That hour belonged to tired people, to men counting steps instead of dreams, to workers whose lives moved on schedules, not headlines. Ivan Petrov was one of them. He stepped off the trolley bus near Prospect Mira, pulled his coat tighter, and exhaled into the cold. February in Moscow did not forgive weakness. The air cut through wool and skin like it had something personal against you. Streetlights reflected on dirty snow, turning it gray, the same color as the buildings, the same color as most thoughts after a long workday. Ivan adjusted the leather briefcase under his arm. Inside were nothing but files, inventory lists, signatures, stamps, paper that mattered to someone else during office hours and to no one at night. He was 36, married, one child, one room in a shared apartment. An ordinary life in an extraordinary country, which meant the safest way to survive was to remain invisible. Ivan had learned that early. Don't ask questions. Don't stand out. Don't be late. Don't be curious. Curiosity, people said quietly, was expensive in Moscow. The apartment block rose ahead of him. 8 floors of concrete, identical balconies, identical windows. It looked like every other building in the district. That was the point. In the Soviet Union, sameness was a kind of camouflage. He entered through the heavy front door, the smell of boiled cabbage and damp coats greeting him like an old, unwanted friend. The stairwell lights flickered. They always did. Ivan didn't notice anymore. Some things fade into the background when life trains you not to expect better. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing. His right knee ached, an old injury from military service that never healed properly. He counted floors by habit, not by signs. Second, third, fourth. His floor. The hallway was narrow, painted a dull green that had once tried to look cheerful decades ago. 4 doors, all the same. Same color, same locks, same small peepholes like unblinking eyes. Ivan stopped in front of his door, or what he believed was his door. He shifted the briefcase to his left hand and reached into his pocket with the right. His fingers wrapped around cold metal, his keyring. 3 keys, one for the building, one for the apartment, one he never remembered the purpose of, but kept anyway, just in case. He didn't look at the number on the door. He never did. Routine had replaced attention. Ivan inserted the key into the lock. It slid in smoothly. That alone was not unusual. The lock was old, worn down by years of use. What happened next was, the key turned. Easily. No resistance. No familiar stiffness. No need to jiggle it the way he always had to. Ivan paused. For a second, a small irritation crossed his mind. Finally fixed it, he thought. After all these months. He pushed the door open. The hinges didn't creak. That was the first thing that felt wrong. His apartment door always creaked. Loudly. It announced you before you even stepped inside. His wife complained about it. The neighbors complained about it. Ivan had promised to oil it more times than he could count. This door opened in silence. Ivan stepped inside. The light was already on. He froze. In his apartment, the light was never on at this hour. His wife turned it off to save electricity. Always. It was a small habit, but habits were law and shared living. Waste was noticed. Waste was reported. Ivan didn't move. The room smelled neutral. No cooking. No soap. No cigarette smoke. His heart beat once hard. He looked down at the floor. No familiar rug. The walls were bare. Not even the faded calendar with last year's dates crossed out. Not even the crooked photograph of his son that his wife insisted on hanging despite the peeling paint. This was not his home. For a brief, foolish moment, Ivan wondered if he had walked into the wrong apartment block entirely. But the stairwell, the smell, the chipped paint on the wall near the entrance, it was all correct. Too correct. His stomach tightened. In Moscow, entering the wrong apartment was not just embarrassing. It was dangerous. Privacy was thin. Trust was thinner. People noticed things. And when people noticed, authorities followed. Ivan's first instinct was to leave immediately. Back out. Close the door. Pretend nothing happened. But his body didn't listen. Instead, he took one cautious step forward. The room was small, but organized with a precision that made him uncomfortable. A table stood in the center. 2 chairs. No cushions. No decorations. Nothing personal. This was a place someone used, not lived in. A quiet fear crept up his spine. Someone could be here, his mind warned. He listened. No voices. No radio. No movement. Just the low hum of electricity. Ivan swallowed. Every ordinary Soviet citizen carried the same invisible weight, the awareness of power. Not the kind you saw, but the kind that watched. The kind that didn't knock loudly. The kind that asked polite questions and expected perfect answers. Ivan thought of his wife, his son, the school reports, the medical files, the way everything in their lives existed somewhere on paper. He took another step, against his better judgment. On the far wall, partially hidden behind a curtain, was a metal cabinet. Gray, industrial, locked. Not a wardrobe, not a pantry, a cabinet. Ivan's breathing grew shallow. He knew enough to know what didn't belong in a normal apartment. He had served in the army. He had seen equipment rooms. He had learned to recognize the difference between domestic life and official silence. This place carried authority in its stillness. Suddenly, the click of a clock sounded loud in the room. Ivan flinched. That was when the weight of his mistake finally settled. He was standing in a place meant to be unnoticed. And he had noticed it. Somewhere, far above ordinary lives and paperwork, systems depended on people not making mistakes like this. On doors staying closed. On keys fitting only one lock. Ivan looked back at the door. It was still open. In the hallway outside, footsteps echoed faintly. From another floor, another life, another story that had nothing to do with his. He realized, with a clarity that chilled him more than the February cold, that tonight had already gone wrong. Not because of a decision, not because of bravery, but because of a habit, a routine walk, a familiar staircase, a key turned without thought. And in a city built on secrecy, that was sometimes all it took. Ivan reached for the door, unaware that this ordinary mistake, this wrong door, open for less than a minute, had already set something irreversible in motion. Apartment 43B, Kamyanalka Block, Prospect Mira, Moscow. Ivan closed the door behind him, slowly. Not fully, just enough to reduce the noise from the hallway. His hand stayed on the handle longer than necessary, as if the metal itself could tell him what to do next. Leave, it seemed to say. Walk away. Forget this ever happened. That was the smart choice. But fear does strange things to ordinary people. It doesn't always make you run. Sometimes it makes you freeze. Sometimes it makes you want to understand what you're afraid of. Ivan stood still, listening. No footsteps. No voices. No sound of a radio being switched off in panic. Nothing. The silence was controlled. Deliberate. He took a breath and looked around again, this time slower, more carefully. The room was small, but unnaturally orderly. Not clean in the way a home is clean, but clean like an office after hours. Emptied of personality. The table had no tablecloth. No scratches. 2 chairs were pushed in with exact symmetry. Someone cared about alignment here. Someone who didn't live with children. Ivan noticed the floor next. The dust pattern was wrong. There were marks where furniture had been moved repeatedly, but no furniture remained. As if the room was being reset over and over again. His mind searched for an explanation that wouldn't scare him. Maybe it's a temporary flat, he thought. Someone in transit. But even in transit, people left traces. A coat, a cup, a book, a mistake. Here, there were none. Ivan's eyes moved to the window. Heavy curtains, drawn halfway, blocking the streetlight outside, but allowing just enough glow to keep the room from darkness. That choice alone made him uneasy. People either wanted light or darkness. This was something in between. He felt exposed. The clock on the wall ticked again. Loud. Precise. Ivan realized he had been standing there too long. He should leave. He turned toward the door. That was when he saw the second detail. On the table lay a notebook. Not a school notebook. Not the cheap kind sold everywhere. This was thick. Black cover. No writing on the front. No label. Closed. Ivan did not touch it, but he stepped closer. His heart pounded in his ears. Every second inside this apartment felt heavier than the last, as if the walls themselves were counting his presence. He noticed the smell now, not of food or people, but of metal and dust. Old air. Stored air. He glanced again at the cabinet near the wall. It was bolted to the floor. That was not normal. Even wardrobes weren't fixed like that. Whatever was inside, someone didn't want it moved quickly. Ivan swallowed. This was not theft. This was not coincidence. This was purpose. And purpose in Moscow rarely belonged to individuals. A sudden thought struck him. What if someone returns? He imagined the door opening behind him. A stranger's face. No shouting. Just a pause. A look. A calculation. Ivan knew that look. Everyone did. He stepped back toward the entrance. Carefully. Slowly. That was when his elbow brushed against the wall. A faint click sounded. He froze. The sound came again, soft, mechanical. Ivan turned his head. Behind the curtain, near the cabinet, a small red light had appeared. Barely visible. Steady. Watching. His chest tightened. That light had not been there before. Or maybe it had, and he simply hadn't noticed. Either way, it was on now. Ivan didn't understand what it meant, but he understood enough to know this. Something had been activated. His breathing became shallow. He resisted the urge to run. Running made noise. Noise made attention. Attention was dangerous. He reached for the door handle again. It was colder than before. As he pulled the door open, he paused one last time and looked back at the room. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. The red light continued to glow behind the curtain, silent and patient, like it had all the time in the world. Ivan stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind him. This time, the lock clicked loudly. Too loudly. He stood there for a moment, staring at the door number. 43B. His apartment was 43A. The difference was one letter. One habit. One mistake. Ivan walked away without looking back. But somewhere inside that apartment, the red light kept shining, recording, signaling, marking a moment that was never supposed to exist. And Ivan Petrov, ordinary clerk, father, husband, had just crossed a line he didn't even know was there. Stairwell and apartment 43B, Kamyanalka block, Prospect Mira, Moscow. Ivan descended the stairs too quickly. His hand slid along the cold metal railing, steadying himself as his legs moved faster than his thoughts. Each step echoed louder than it should have. Or maybe that was just his nerves amplifying everything. By the time he reached the third floor, his breath was shallow and uneven. Stop, he told himself. You are acting suspicious. In Moscow, fear itself could make you look guilty. He slowed his pace, forcing his shoulders to relax, his posture to return to the shape of a tired man going home. On the second floor landing, he paused and pretended to adjust his scarf. Anyone watching would see nothing unusual, but he felt watched anyway. That feeling followed him all the way back up the stairs to the fourth floor, his actual floor, where he unlocked his real apartment door with trembling fingers. This time, the key resisted just like always. The familiar creak greeted him. Never had that sound felt so comforting. Ivan closed the door behind him and leaned against it, listening. The apartment was dark, quiet, safe. His wife and son were visiting her sister for the night. He was alone. He didn't turn on the light. Instead, he stood there, counting his breaths, waiting for the pounding knock that never came. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. That should have calmed him. It didn't, because Ivan understood something fundamental. Whatever that place was, it did not operate on impulse. It operated on systems, on procedures, on patience. He removed his coat and hung it carefully, as if order itself could protect him. His briefcase rested on the chair. He sat down, but did not open it. His hand shook slightly. You should forget this, he told himself. People survive by forgetting. But forgetting was hard when your mind kept returning to that red light. He pictured it again. Small, steady, unblinking. He had not touched anything. He was certain of that. Yet something had activated. Something had noticed his presence. Ivan stood and walked to the window. He parted the curtain just enough to see the street below. Snow continued to fall lightly. A car idled near the corner longer than necessary. He told himself he was imagining it. At 9:53 p.m., a faint sound reached him. Not from outside. From above. A muffled click, then another. Ivan looked up at the ceiling. Apartment 43B. He felt a tightening in his chest. He knew this building. Pipes creaked. Radios leaked sound. Arguments traveled easily through thin walls. But this was different. Controlled. Measured. He pressed his ear against the wall. Nothing. Then very faintly, a mechanical hum. Brief. Then gone. Ivan stepped back as if the wall had burned him. He was not supposed to hear that. He sat down again, gripping his knees, replaying every second in his mind. Had he touched the wall? Had his elbow pressed something? Had the door triggered it? He had no answers. That was the worst part. At 9:55 p.m., somewhere inside apartment 43B, a device completed a cycle. A signal was sent. Not loud. Not obvious. Just enough to say, something changed. 2 kilometers away, in an unmarked office building, a man looked up from his paperwork. He was not alarmed. Not yet. A small indicator on his console had shifted from green to amber. A routine anomaly. Logged automatically. Time-stamped. He noted it without emotion. Equipment misbehaved. Locks were down. Tenants made mistakes. The system existed to notice such things. Back in his apartment, Ivan tried to distract himself. He boiled water for tea, but forgot to add the leaves. He stared at the steaming glass until it cooled. Every sound in the building now felt amplified. Footsteps in the hallway. A door closing somewhere below. A cough through the wall. Each one tightened his nerves. He kept checking the clock. 10:07 p.m. 10:12 p.m. At 10:18 p.m., headlights swept across his window. A vehicle slowed, then moved on. He forced himself not to look too closely. You are not important, he repeated silently. This has nothing to do with you. But deep down, he knew that was not entirely true. Because importance was not always about intention. Sometimes it was about proximity. At 10:31 p.m., the sound came again. This time clearer. From above. Footsteps. More than one. Measured. Heavy. Purposeful. Ivan stood. He did not move toward the door. He did not turn off the lights. He did nothing that could be interpreted as reaction. He stood in the middle of his room, hands at his sides, as still as the furniture. The footsteps stopped. He imagined men in dark coats entering apartment 43B. Imagined keys that fit perfectly. Imagined quiet voices using official tones. No shouting. No struggle. No mistakes. Just correction. At 10:44 p.m., the footsteps left. Ivan waited another 10 minutes before exhaling. He did not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the red light again. Still, calm, patient. He understood something now, with a clarity that scared him more than the event itself. Whatever had happened was already beyond him. He was no longer part of the story. He was part of the margin. And in systems like these, margins were watched carefully. Ivan lay awake until morning, listening to the buildings settle, to pipes clank, to life continue as if nothing had happened. But somewhere above him, behind a door marked 43B, the apartment had already been reset, and the system that guarded it had adjusted, quietly accounting for a mistake that should never have occurred. You said, Moscow streets, Ivan Petrov's workplace. Morning arrived slowly in Moscow, not in bursts of sunlight or chirping birds, but in muted grays and the faint hum of trolley buses rattling through icy streets. Ivan Petrov woke before his alarm, a rare thing for him. Sleep had been fitful, shallow, haunted by the red light, the cold silence, and the strange hum from the apartment above. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of his small room in 43A. The walls were thin. The floorboards creaked. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow moved with intention. The ordinary routine of an office clerk now felt foreign. He dressed quietly, putting on his threadbare coat and polished shoes, aware of every movement. Coffee was poured mechanically, bread eaten without taste. By 7:15 a.m., he stepped out into the street. The city had begun its daily rhythm. Commuters hurried, vendors arranged their stalls, and the trolley buses groaned under the weight of their passengers. Ivan moved with purpose, yet he could not shake the sensation of being observed. At first, he dismissed it. Moscow was a city of millions. Observing faces was normal. Crowds, shops, traffic, everyone glanced at everyone else. It was mundane, harmless. But then he saw the car. It was parked a few meters behind him, near the corner of Prospect Mira. A small, unmarked sedan. The driver sat perfectly still, hands on the wheel. No one inside waved, no one spoke. For a moment, Ivan thought he was imagining it. He turned down a side street. The car followed. He quickened his pace. So did the vehicle. Ivan ducked into a narrow alley. It did the same. A sense of dread built in his chest. This was not coincidence. He reached his workplace, a low-rise government office where clerks typed, filed, and photocopied endlessly. Inside, the smell of ink and paper greeted him like an old friend. He exhaled. Safe. But the fear had already planted itself. Sitting at his desk, he tried to focus on inventory sheets, signatures, and forms. Yet his mind wandered. Apartment 43B. The red light. The locked cabinet. The faint hum. He noticed it first subtly. A man in a dark coat lingering near the office entrance, then disappearing as quickly as he arrived. Then, at lunch, two men outside the building, standing next to a kiosk, kept glancing his way. Their eyes were polite, but calculating. Professional. Observing. Ivan's hands shook slightly as he sipped his tea. He was not a spy. He did not deal with secrets. He did not even have a notable past in the army. He was a clerk. And yet, he felt hunted. This is impossible, he thought. I did nothing. But he had done something. Even small mistakes can echo farther than expected. That evening, Ivan walked home with the same cautious awareness he had developed the night before. Each footstep on the icy pavement felt like a broadcast of his presence. The car was there again, parked a little further down, engine off, headlights dimmed. Ivan's heart hammered. He ducked into a grocery shop, browsing the shelves slowly, deliberately. The sedan did not follow. Perhaps coincidence. Or perhaps not. By 8:30 p.m., he was in the stairwell of his apartment block. His chest tightened. Floorboards creaked under his weight. His own apartment felt impossibly small and fragile. He reached for his key, slowing his hand. Then he froze. The door above him, 43B, was ajar. A faint red glow leaked into the stairwell. Ivan's stomach lurched. Someone had returned. Or someone had arrived. He backed away quietly, pressing against the wall. The door did not open further. The light went off. A muffled sound, metal against metal, reached him. Ivan exhaled slowly, barely moving. Inside apartment 43B, the scene was silent but active. A figure moved with precision, checking the cabinet, scanning logs, adjusting equipment. The small red light, which had recorded Ivan's mistake the previous night, was now gone. But the system had not forgotten. Not human memory. Not paper records. The machine remembered. Over the next 48 hours, Ivan's world shifted. At work, subtle signs appeared. Files slightly misfiled. Instructions in handwriting that was not familiar. A clerk who usually avoided him now asked unexpected questions. Each interaction, normal on the surface, carried an undercurrent of calculation. Someone knew. Not because they caught him entering his apartment that night. Not because they had witnesses, but because the system registered an anomaly. And in Moscow, anomalies were noted. Ivan tried to act normal. He laughed at jokes. He nodded at colleagues. He answered letters. But at night, he imagined the red light. He imagined the silent watchers, returning to apartment 43B to verify, recalibrate, reset. He imagined men in dark coats tracing a path through his building, noting patterns, checking locks. And he felt powerless. For the first time, he realized that life for ordinary citizens could be measured not by ambition or effort, but by mistakes, small, human mistakes that could ripple outward with consequences no one intended. By the evening of February 18th, the car was gone. No more glances from the street. No more distant hums. But Ivan could not forget. He walked into his apartment, closing the door, carefully checking the locks twice. He turned on the light. It felt safer somehow. Yet when he sat at the table, staring at the same blank wall. He knew that the watchers had not left. They only waited. That night, Ivan did something he had never done before. He wrote in a small notebook, not about the apartment, not about the red light, about himself, about fear, about routine, about how a single key could turn an ordinary life upside down. He did not write names. He did not write addresses. Just words. A silent testimony for himself, to remember that some mistakes, however small, could trigger systems far larger than a single man. By the time he finally slept, Moscow was quiet. The trolley buses had stopped. Snow continued to fall. The city held its secrets tightly. And somewhere above him, apartment 43B awaited the next anomaly, the next mistake, the next human being who believed the world was as ordinary as he thought. Ivan Petrov slept lightly, his dreams haunted by red lights and silent watchers, unaware that history, in small, quiet ways, had already noticed him. Apartment 43B, Kamenyalka Block, Prospect Mira, Moscow. Moscow sleeps lightly in February. The wind howls along Prospect Mira, rattling shutters and stirring the snow like a whisper warning of secrets. Few people are awake at 2:15 a.m. Few dare to be. Apartment 43B had been waiting. Patient, silent, precise. Inside, the air was thick with controlled stillness. The hum of equipment, the faint click of timers, the whisper of a ventilation system, all calibrated to perfection. The apartment had no history of noise complaints, no personal mess, no visible life. And now, on this night, it would not see a single mistake go uncorrected, because the system had remembered Ivan Petrov. Outside, a small unmarked van pulled quietly to the curb. 3 men stepped out. Not soldiers, not officers in uniform. Just men in dark coats, gloves, hats pulled low over their faces. Ordinary in appearance. Extraordinary in purpose. They approached apartment 43B without hesitation. Their footsteps made no sound on the icy stairs. Their hands did not fumble with locks. The door opened for them in silence. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been 2 nights earlier. Metal cabinet bolted to the floor, table perfectly aligned, the faint smell of metal and dust. Nothing moved, nothing reacted, except for the logs. The equipment recorded every action Ivan had taken, every mistake, every hesitation, every glance at the red light. The men reviewed the data silently. No words were spoken. Their eyes moved rapidly across screens, dials, and printed reports. They noted the timestamp, February 17th, 9:42 p.m. An ordinary clerk, a wrong key, a door turned, and suddenly, a perfectly hidden safe house had been compromised. They moved with practiced precision. Cameras, radios, and communication devices were carefully dismantled. Wires disconnected, stored, cataloged. A small file cabinet that had appeared innocuous was removed entirely. Every item was replaced with nothing. No evidence of occupancy. No sign that anyone had been there. The apartment would appear normal in the morning. Ordinary. Clean. Untouched. And yet, the system had logged a breach. The watchers had noticed. They always noticed. Meanwhile, Ivan slept in apartment 43A, unaware of the orchestration above him. He dreamed of the red light, the silent apartment, the hum that had haunted him. He dreamed of the sense that the walls were alive, watching him as he moved, recording his smallest mistakes. In dreams, he turned the key. The door opened. The light glowed, and he ran, but there was nowhere to hide. By 2:45 a.m., the safe house was empty. All equipment secured, all sensitive materials removed, all traces erased. And then, as silently as they had come, the men departed. Apartment 43B remained. A quiet apartment in a quiet building on a quiet street. Nothing had happened, but everything had changed. The following day, Moscow's rhythm returned to normal. Ivan went to work, drank his tea, filed papers, and walked past the very building that had triggered a flurry of KGB activity. Nothing seemed out of place. No red light, no surveillance car, no footsteps in the hall. And yet, Ivan could feel it. Something shifted beneath the surface of his ordinary life. He knew without understanding exactly how, that apartment 43B was different now, that it had been exposed, corrected, and neutralized, and that he had been the reason. He never received a warning. No knock on the door. No call from an official. Just a quiet sense that he had crossed a line invisible to him, but glaring to those trained to notice. For Ivan, life continued as before. He went to work. He came home. He slept. He ate. He smiled. But he carried something heavier than sleep. A quiet awareness that systems are built to fail only when humans err, and that even ordinary mistakes could trigger extraordinary consequences. Weeks later, he would hear rumors at work about a safe house that had been cleared, about a system that had been compromised, about anonymous operatives moving with precision at night. Ivan said nothing. He could not. For ordinary citizens, knowing too much was dangerous. Silence was survival. Yet he remembered every detail, every sensation, the red light, the locked cabinet, the hum, the wrong key in the wrong door, and the men in dark coats, moving silently, correcting a mistake that was never supposed to exist. The lesson settled quietly in his mind. Life, for an ordinary man, is fragile. Not because of grand conspiracies or loud violence, but because systems, perfect and invisible, depend on your habits, your routine, your smallest errors. And when those errors occur, the world shifts quietly but irrevocably. Ivan Petrov never entered apartment 43B again. He never mentioned it. He never thought he would be remembered. But somewhere, the system remembered him, logged him, adjusted its parameters, marked him as a variable, a single key, a single mistake. A life forever changed, though outwardly unchanged. By morning, apartment 43B looked ordinary. Neighbors passed it without notice. The snow lay untouched. The windows reflected nothing unusual. And yet, it was no longer just a door. It had been exposed, corrected, and it waited silently for the next mistake. And Ivan Petrov, ordinary clerk, ordinary husband, ordinary father, understood finally that history, systems, and secrets are built not for the extraordinary, but for the human mistakes that echo quietly through time. Moscow, Ivan Petrov's apartment and workplace. March in Moscow was deceptively calm. The snow had begun to melt in patches, revealing streets streaked with mud and remnants of winter's harshness. The city moved with its usual rhythm, trolley buses groaning, market vendors calling out, children running along sidewalks in clumsy boots. But beneath the surface, something invisible had shifted. For Ivan Petrov, nothing appeared different. Life went on as it always had. He walked to his office each morning, briefcase in hand, careful but routine. His colleagues nodded at him. He smiled, returned greetings, filed forms, typed documents. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. And yet, Ivan carried a secret weight, a private awareness that life could be altered by a single misstep. It had been over a month since the incident with apartment 43B, yet the memory remained vivid. He could still see the red light behind the curtain, feel the hum of machinery vibrating through the floor, and hear, in his mind, the silent click of a door closing behind him. He could not explain why it haunted him so. He had touched nothing. He had caused no apparent harm. Yet, the world he had unknowingly stepped into had already noticed him, logged him, adjusted itself around him. One evening, he returned home after work. The streetlights glinted on melting ice, reflecting a dim orange glow against the dark buildings. Ivan's coat was damp, his gloves cold, his breath visible in the frosty air. He reached apartment 43A and entered quietly. The flat was still empty. He lived alone that week. His wife had gone to visit relatives. For the first time since the incident, Ivan dared to sit. He looked around his apartment, the peeling paint, the crooked photos, the familiar clutter, and felt the oddest mix of comfort and dread. The ordinary familiarity of his home contrasted sharply with the sterile perfection of apartment 43B, which lingered in his memory like a warning. He poured himself tea. The steam curled into the air, carrying the faint scent of dried leaves. He sipped slowly, thinking about how ordinary life could hide extraordinary dangers. Even something as small as a key, the wrong key in the wrong door, could ripple outward with consequences far beyond comprehension. Weeks passed. Ivan resumed his routines, the office, the tram rides, the neighborhood grocery. He tried to act as though nothing had happened, but subtle changes gnawed at him. He noticed the unfamiliar way people glanced at him. Coincidence, he told himself. A colleague asking unexpected questions, curious about mundane office procedures, could just be coincidence. Footsteps in the stairwell at odd hours, probably another tenant. Yet Ivan could not shake the sensation that someone, somewhere, was watching him, even now. He could not see them, could not hear them, but he felt the system's awareness, invisible but undeniable. He began small routines, leaving his apartment at varying times, walking different routes, checking behind parked cars, avoiding lingering in open stairwells. Each precaution was minor, almost subconscious, yet it was a pattern imposed by fear, a fear born not of imagination, but of reality he could not name. Then one evening, he received an unexpected knock at the office door. A man in a dark overcoat, hat low, gloves black, stepped inside. He introduced himself politely, without urgency. No accusations, no threats, just a calm presence that felt heavier than any words. "Mr. Petrov," he said quietly, "please consider everything you saw last month an anomaly. Forget it. Nothing further will be required of you. You are free to resume your life." The words should have comforted Ivan. They didn't, because freedom, in this context, felt conditional. He nodded silently, said nothing. The man left, closing the door softly behind him. No one else seemed to notice. Life went on. Routine resumed. In the following days, Ivan's awareness grew. He began noticing things he hadn't before. The pattern of lights in neighboring apartments. The way the mail was collected. The subtle vibrations through the walls when the central heating kicked on. Every ordinary sound now carried a hidden meaning. Every shadow a potential signal. And yet, he kept his life outwardly unchanged. He visited his wife and child as always. He prepared meals, drank tea, watched television. He laughed at jokes. He filed papers. To everyone else, he was ordinary. But Ivan understood the fragility of ordinariness. He understood that history and the systems that shape it often pass silently through lives like his, interrupted only by mistakes, coincidences, or the faintest chance. Sometimes, late at night, Ivan would lie awake and think about apartment 43B. He wondered if the red light still glowed, quietly marking its place, recording events for a system that never slept. He imagined men returning, adjusting, checking, confirming. He imagined the locked cabinet, empty now, a silent witness to his inadvertent trespass. He realized that the world he had walked through for 36 years, the world of routine, of stability, of predictable office life, was fragile. Not because of the ordinary dangers everyone feared, like accidents or illness, but because systems, no matter how advanced, depended on human behavior, and humans were fallible. Months later, Ivan's life returned to a semblance of calm. The red light, the locked cabinet, the silent watchers, all became memories he stored quietly in a corner of his mind. He told no one. He could not. Not his wife. Not friends. Not colleagues. Because knowing too much could be dangerous. Even memories could be dangerous. He continued to take the tram, to file forms, to sip tea, to watch his son play. Life moved forward. Routine reasserted itself. And yet he was changed. Ordinary life now carried a layer of vigilance, an invisible tension, a quiet understanding that mistakes, however small, could ripple outward, reaching systems far larger and more powerful than he could imagine. Ivan often reflected on the lesson quietly, with the kind of clarity that comes after surviving something unknowable but not deadly. History is not always shaped by the bold, the brave, or the ambitious. Sometimes, it is shaped by the smallest human errors, the ones no one notices until the consequences have already arrived. A wrong key in a lock, a step taken in the wrong apartment, a breath in the wrong place at the wrong time. Those are the moments systems are built to record. Those are the moments that quietly shift everything. And for Ivan Petrov, ordinary man, husband, and father, the lesson had been seared into his mind forever. He kept his life as ordinary as possible. He smiled at colleagues. He argued gently with his son over homework. He laughed at jokes on television. He drank his tea. He filed his papers. Everything seemed normal. And yet, in the quiet moments when the wind rattled the shutters or a pipe groaned in the night, he could feel it. The system watching, always precise, always patient, always aware. Not as punishment, not as threat, but as a reminder, ordinary mistakes matter. Because in a world built on secrets, on precision, and on silence, even an ordinary man can leave a mark that echoes far beyond his understanding. And Ivan Petrov had the wrong key, the wrong door, a single, simple mistake. History had noticed, and life would never quite feel the same again. Ivan Petrov returned to his ordinary life, but he was no longer the same man. The wrong key, the wrong door, the red light behind apartment 43B, these were small things. Tiny, almost laughable errors that anyone could make. And yet, they had set in motion events far beyond his comprehension. The KGB safe house had been exposed, corrected, and neutralized, all because of him. A man who had only wanted to go home after a long day at work. He never received recognition. He never received a warning. And no one would ever know his role in history. But he remembered. He remembered the hum of machinery, the metallic smell of the apartment, the patient red glow of a light that marked his presence. And he understood something fundamental. History is not only shaped by the bold or the powerful. It is shaped by ordinary people, by ordinary mistakes, by tiny moments that ripple outward quietly, invisibly, but irrevocably. In the world of secrets, systems, and silent watchers, a single misstep can alter the course of events in ways no one anticipates. Ivan's life returned to routine, work, family, tea, paper, but beneath it all, he carried the weight of that one night. A night that proved even the most ordinary man could leave a mark on the extraordinary. And that is why, in a city built on secrecy and precision, every small choice matters. Even a wrong key in a lock. Even you, reading this, could be part of history in ways you do not yet see. Because the smallest mistakes can sometimes echo the loudest. Have you ever made a small mistake that changed something bigger than you expected? What would you do if you realized you accidentally uncovered a secret you weren't supposed to see? Could you stay calm like Ivan, or would fear take over? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know how you would react if faced with a situation like this. And if this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unbelievable Cold War story.